Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. Today we will see what if Femme Naruto becomes princess. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. The sound of metal hitting metal filled the clearing. The air was filled with the sounds of a person breathing heavy, their lungs trying to gulp down every ounce of air they could. Okay, I think that's enough for today Naru-chan. You're coming along splendidly, I've got a mission for you, so why don't you head home and clean yourself up? Meet me back at my office in 2 hours. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the Sandaime Hokage, said. Naruko Uzumaki was standing a few paces away from him in the clearing, drenched in sweat, her blonde hair stuck to the back of her neck in its tight ponytail. She wore a simple black form-fitting sleeveless shirt, and short black shorts that went down to mid-thigh. Around her waist was a studded belt that held her sword, which was situated on her lower back. As she sheathed her sword, she made sure that the handle was on her right side, so she could quickly draw it when she needed to. Naruto had been training with the Hokage for the last 4 years. He said it was because he loved to teach others, but she knew it was because he felt guilty for not being able to protect her during the incident 4 years ago. "Hi, sensei. I'll be there in 2 hours," Naruto said without looking towards him, as she moved to where her Hite 8 had fallen off. Quickly tying it on over her closed eyes, she used her shunshin to quickly make it to her apartment. Hiruzen watched her go, and he released a sigh. 4 years. 4 long years of him teaching her as much as he could. He knew it might not be fair for many of the other genin, but not everyone was like Naruto. Being the Kyuubi Jinchuriki was hard enough for most, not having the will to keep going after the constant beatings and harassment the villagers kept doing, but also having been raped in her own apartment. Hiruzen's anger flared again. Every time he thought of it, he couldn't help but curse his own incompetence. He was supposed to protect her, to keep her safe, but instead someone had somehow gotten past the guard he had set for her and did something that was absolutely unforgivable. He could still remember when he found her. Flashback. Hiruzen was walking up to an apartment complex. It was nearing the middle of the day, and he hadn't heard anything from the blonde ball of energy that was his surrogate granddaughter. Normally this wouldn't be an issue. That is if she normally didn't show up every single day asking for him to tell her more and more stories. Naruto was always full of wonder. She was always willing to sit and listen about stories of battles he was in. Didn't matter what time period, anything from his genin days to his losing of his successor. He always told her stories about the Hokages. She had really liked the Shodem and Yondaime, really falling in with their idea of peace. As Hiruzen walked up the last few steps to make it to her apartment, he noticed the door had been smashed open and propped up to make it appear closed. Giving a quick flare of his chakra, his personal Anbu squad appeared and took up positions around the broken door. The elderly shinobi nodded his head in signal and the Anbu team, without any word, burst through the door. After a few seconds, the all-clear signal was sounded by the Anbu captain, and Hiruzen rushed inside. Unfortunately he wasn't prepared at all for the sight, and off to the side he noticed that 2 of the 4 other Anbu weren't ready either as they were throwing up. Tied up and hanging from her wrists from the ceiling was Naruto. Her body naked and covered in slashes, chunks of her blonde hair littered the floor where someone had torn it from her head and threw it to the ground. Her legs had also been tied so that she was spread eagle style, a puddle of human fluids, both blood and seminal fluids, under her whipped feet. A gag had been in her mouth, and tear stains were still shadowed on her face. Hiruzen had seen many things. This horror done to a young girl was not one of them. She was only 8 years old. Hiruzen, through sheer willpower, forced the bile back down his throat so he could issue orders. Tori, I want you to get me the best Inuzuka and Aburama trackers now. I want whoever did this hunted down and brought in. Inu, Neko, take her to the hospital and stay with her. I want to know the second she is conscious. Hiruzen ordered, taking on the persona that demanded respect. He wasn't the elderly man everyone loved so much. No, he was the Kami no Shinobi, one of the most powerful shinobi to ever have graced the village. The Sandaime was livid, and he knew as his Anbu moved to follow his orders to the letter that those that had done such an unforgivable and inhuman act would not live long. End flashback. And they didn't. They were all tracked down. All 15 men and even 2 different women were quickly rounded up and given over to ANBU's T&I department, where Ibiki had broken each and every one of them with the help of his men. He had interrogated them for days on end, never stopping until he had every facet of the truth. Then they were all publicly executed. No trial, no last words. Just pulled into the center of the village, and the Sandaime personal killed every one of them with his bow staff. The villagers were reminded that day why he was not to be underestimated for any reason. Unfortunately, the civilian council tried to cause an uproar because apparent use of force against the civilian population. Needless to say, those that did open their mouths found themselves in the capable hands of Ibiki. Hiruzen took no prisoners and no one was spared from his wrath. By the end of everything, he had killed close to half of the civilian council, as Ibiki had uncovered a multitude of crimes spanning from bribery to child slavery. He had even uncovered a plot of a few of the civilian council members trying to put together a coup attempt against the Sandaime. He quickly ordered a full investigation of every member of his council. When Naruto had woken up, he had asked her for her forgiveness after telling her what he had done to her attackers. He had failed to protect her, and yet she had forgave him as if it was the simplest thing in the world. When she forgave him, he gave her time to recover. After 2 weeks in the hospital, he went back to her and offered her personal training. He wanted to make up for his failing to protect her. She again told him that it wasn't necessary, but he had insisted. She had said that he had already helped her see when he had trained her hearing, her ability to take in sense. She quickly became adept at learning kenjutsu, even having developed a style all her own as well as learning the one he taught her. He didn't hold anything back when it came to training her, unless of course it would harm her body. He used weights to increase her speed and endurance, helped her gain as good of a chakra control as he could, and even helped her learn and master her elemental affinity along with a plethora of jutsu with it. His training, though, didn't just consist of physical means. He had made sure to teach her literature, science, math, and many other subjects. Hiruzen believed in a well-rounded shinobi, not one that was all strength and no brains. It made things easier when he had taught her the Kage Bushin no Jutsu and she could take full use of it memory transfer. She had even helped him in his fight against the endless paperwork with the jutsu. Yeah, Hiruzen pulled his pipe out of his sleeve and lit it with a quick application of Kaden chakra. Taking a big inhale of tobacco and exhaling, the elderly man couldn't help but smile at the young girl's accomplishments. Well, I had better make sure everything is ready, Hiruzen muttered to himself as he left the clearing. With Naruto had made it to her apartment. Since the incident, she had been moved out of the civilian district and into the shinobi district. She was even given an apartment in what was an unofficial Anbu apartment complex. She had made a fuss over everyone taking pity on her, but they just seemed to ignore her tantrums and did it anyway. It wasn't that she was ungrateful, far from it, she just hated to appear weak. With her disability, people already looked at her as if she was weak, and she was out to prove each and every one of them wrong. From all of her training, she was working there. Naruto opened the door to her apartment and quickly took off her workout sandals and headed further into the apartment. She could hear the shower going already, and it didn't surprise her at all. She had long since gotten used to her girlfriend staying over or just dropping by whenever. Her girlfriend had been with her through everything, though it was only recently that they started dating, ever since she turned 14. She was sure if she didn't have her girlfriend she would have been a wreck beyond belief, but she had been Naruto's anchor in the story of emotions. She had helped in getting her set up, sat by her through all the breakdowns and nightmares. Naruto had become attached to her, and she knew it. It was only within the past 4 months that she had realized that her feelings had turned in a more romantic fashion. Luckily for Naruto, the woman had also had the same feelings. Naruto quickly pulled her sweat-soaked clothes off and threw them in the dirty hamper by the bathroom door and walked into. "Hey Haim, mind if I join you?" Naruto called out as she opened the door to the steam-filled shower, without waiting for a response. Naruto quickly was under the warm spray, letting out a small moan as it seemed to seep into her muscles. She then felt a pair of arms wrap around her and pull her against another body, the woman's breasts pushed against her back. "How was training?" Yugo Izuki asked in a husky tone. "Oh, just fine. I still don't know how that old man fights like that and makes it look effortless. I still can't make him break a sweat." Naruto complained slightly, as she pushed her body into the older woman's. Yugo just laughed. "Well, of course, he is the Hokage for a reason. You'll have to be able to beat me if you want to make him even break a sweat," the older woman said as she still held the younger girl. Naruto quickly turned around and kissed the older woman, catching her by surprise. "Oh, I'm pretty sure I know how to beat you," Naruto said in a husky whisper, barely audible over the running water, after she had broken the kiss. "Don't start something you can't finish, Naru-chan," Yugo threatened as she slowly backed Naruto up into the shower wall. Naruto, not one to back down, quickly made the first move and wrapped her arms around the older woman, mouth latching onto the others in a heated lover's kiss. Yugo moaned into the kiss, giving Naruto the opportunity to slide her tongue in and begin the battle for dominance. Before the battle had even gone for 20 seconds, Naruto once again broke the kiss, a string of saliva connecting the two women's mouths. "Sorry, Yugo-chan. I've got a mission in 2 hours, otherwise I would so take you up on your offer," Naruto whispered into the purple-haired Kunoichi's ear. You're such a fucking tease, you know that," Yugo complained in exasperation, and she tried to think a reason quickly, even though she knew she too had a mission today as well. "What if I'm really quick?" "Yugo-chan," Naruto whined out. Seeing her opening, Yugo quickly moved her knee in between the girl's legs and used her knee to rub her center. They got a moan from the younger girl, and woman could see her plan working. Whispering in her ear in her same husky voice she used when she wanted to take her lover, "Pretty please Akiroheim," Yugo said, nibbling her earlobe. Naruto's will was faltering, the stimulation from her knee and the woman's hands now assaulting her breasts, groping the B-cup breasts and softly tweaking her nipples. "Oh Kami, Yugo-chan, fine, but please don't take long. I can't keep." That was all she was able to say before Yugo swiftly lifted her up by her ass, and slowly started to enter her now soaked center. Yugo had been ashamed and embarrassed about her condition. Her being a futanari hadn't exactly put her in the category of being normal. Sure, she had a few relationships, even one with a guy once, but none of them made her feel what she felt for Naruto. Naruto had just accepted her for her, and in her words she just had an added bit. Well, a bit that was 8 inches in length and a solid 3 inches in width. As she pushed half of her length in, she could feel Naruto's walls contract around her, contorting themselves to better accommodate her length. She moaned at the sensation and just pulled a little out before pushing back in, getting another 2 inches in. Naruto couldn't help but moan as her lover slowly began to thrust into her. Despite her rape, she loved having with Yugo. She was always tender, always making sure she was pleasuring Naruto and not just taking her own. Naruto let out a small squeak as she felt Yugo bottom out, the head of her shaft bumping the entrance to her womb, sending lightning through her blood. "Oh Kami, Yu-chan, you're so big," Naruto moaned out in a wanton voice. Yugo took that comment as an acceptance that it was alright to continue, so she began to pull back, until just the head was in Naruto, then slammed their hips together, sheathing the full length into Naruto. The younger girl cried out in pleasure as stars began to flash before her eyes, the purpose for her shower completely forgotten. All Naruto could think about was her lover and the sweet pleasure that was filling her body. It wasn't the first time they had done this, but she always loved it. "Faster, Yugo-chan," Naruto cried out as her lover slowly began to pick up her pace. Yugo began to pant as she could feel Naruto start to tighten around her. She could also feel her own climax approaching. "Oh God, Naru-chan. I'm going to come," Yugo moaned out, as her breath started to become labored as she started pounding into her lover's core. Every thrust Yugo made, Naruto could feel the head of her cock beat away at her cervix. Naruto clung to Yugo, wrapping her legs around her waist and arms around neck, as she screamed her release, "I'm coming." Yugo wasn't far behind as she gave one final thrust and cry of pleasure. She spilled her seed deep into Naruto. The younger girl could feel the heat from the cum entering her, and it only served to prolong her climax. After a good 30 seconds, both were breathing heavily as they basked in the glow of their mutual orgasms. Naruto could feel small aftershocks as her muscles continued to slightly spasm. Yugo pulled out of Naruto and a small trickle of semen followed. "Kami, why did I let you talk me into this, for the 10th time I might add?" Naruto whined slightly as she turned into the now cold spray and quickly cleaned up. Yugo only chuckled, "Yeah, because I so pushed you into this. You're only pissed because we couldn't keep going," the older woman said as she got out of the shower and toweled off. "No, I'm upset because of shower is now freezing," Naruto yelled back. Yugo just chuckled again, and walked out of the bathroom. Naruto quickly finished in the shower, not wanting to stay in any longer than necessary in the cold water. As she walked out with a towel wrapped around her blonde hair, she quickly inhaled the scent of her food. Moving with speed that surprised Yugo, Naruto was seated at the table. "I thought I'd cook you something to make up for the cold shower, well that and I have a mission myself," Yugo said as she put the finishing touches on their meal. Naruto just quickly dug into her meal alongside Yugo, both talking about their day and such. After they had finished and cleaned up, Yugo kissed Naruto goodbye as she had to go pack and get ready for her mission and Naruto needed to do the same. With Yugo gone, Naruto could feel the emptiness of her apartment. She always hated this feeling of loneliness. Naruto heaved a sigh as she turned and headed into her bedroom to pack what she needed. Hokage's office. Hiruzen was finishing up some last-minute paperwork when a knock at his door sounded. "Enter." His deep voice sounded out without looking up from the document he was currently reading. As the door opened and closed, he heard some shuffling of feet as someone approached his desk. Quickly signing his name on the document, Hiruzen looked up to see two of his advisors, Kaharu and Homura. "What happened that I deserve such a visit as this?" Hiruzen asked as they normally didn't do anything unless it was of great importance. "Hokage-sama, we've heard you're taking it with you to the daimyo's meeting," Homura said, his voice keeping its all-neutral tone while giving off the air that he was above everything. "I don't know what you mean by it, and I suggest you be very careful with how you phrase anything you say. A personal guard is going with me to this meeting. I personally picked her out due to her skill set," Hiruzen said with an undertone to his own voice that promised pain if the conversation continues on its present course. "Hiruzen," Kaharu spoke up, "she needs to stay in the village for her own protection and to keep the village safe. As a Jinchuriki, she is the weapon that keeps the other villages from attack us." That was all she was able to get out as Hiruzen started to unleash killing intent into the room upon the word weapon being said. "She is not a weapon. She is a young and highly skilled kunoichi of Konoha. I have warned you time and again about this. Now I suggest you leave. I am about to leave as soon as." A knock at the door interrupted what he was saying. "Enter." The door opened to reveal Naruto in her shinobi gear. She wore a black sleeveless, form-fitting black shirt with a hood that was up, her red-clothed hite covering her closed eyes. Her blonde hair was placed in two simple braids going down her chest, making it down at the middle of her toned stomach. She wore black cargo pants, most of the pockets empty, though those that were filled had scrolls in them. Her katana was situated so the handle was on her right, down near the bottom of her back, its crimson hilt within easy reach as it was situated on the studded belt. To finish off the outfit, she wore kunoichi combat boots, like normal combat boots but with a slimmer toe and a small heel. "Hokage-sama, reporting as ordered," Naruto said in a neutral tone with a small bow to show her respect. Hiruzen couldn't help but look upon his student with a smile. "All good, Naruto-chan, you're ready to go." "I trust you are ready to go?" "Hi Hokage-sama," Naruto said as she looked in Hiruzen's direction, completely ignoring the other two in the room. "So what is the mission you want me to do?" Hiruzen chuckled at the excitement he could hear in her voice. "You will be my visible guard. I am going to be meeting with our daimyo as he and the daimyo from Tsuchi no Kuni and the Tsuchikage to discuss the peace treaty that was made at the end of the Third Great War." Naruto, though she didn't show any emotion on the outside that most people would be able to see, on the inside she was nervous as hell. She was just a simple kunoichi, sure she knew of her great burden, but that still didn't make her a noble. She wasn't even from a clan, so she was very nervous indeed. Unfortunately, spending so much time with someone they could begin to read your small tics, and Hiruzen had long ago memorized hers. "There is no reason to be nervous, you'll be by my side the whole time. I'll have a squad of Anbu with us as well, though they will be hidden at all times," Hiruzen said soothingly. Naruto visibly relaxed, and nodded. Hiruzen turned his attention back to his two visitors. "Now if that will be all, I'll call for a council meeting when we get back in a week's time." Seeing as they were being dismissed, both of the elderly advisors bowed and left. After they had left, Naruto turned to her sensei. "You know Oji-sensei, they do kind of have a point." With Naruto's enhanced hearing she heard every word before she even got to the door. "I am a deterrent against war with Konoha. We all know that during the times of peace the shinobi villages get lazy, and standards are dropped. I mean, look at the academy students today. I ran into a small group of them this morning on my morning run and I could tell that I had caught them by surprise. They kept talking about this Sasuke-kun of theirs. I hate fangirls. Naruto vented. Hiruzen chuckled. While it is true that the village might have become complacent over the years of peace, I believe it is good for the younger generation to not experience the harshness of war. If I could, I'd have you as one of these fangirls if I could. That comment got an angry harumph from her. You'd never catch me drooling over a guy like that. Expecially to such an extent that it interferes with my training. I mean, they're supposed to be shinobi. It's not an easy lifestyle and they only choose it so they can look good for whoever this Sasuke is. Naruto said, irritation laced in her voice. They are probably talking about the Uchiha. You know, the one who had been left alive after the massacre. There is always fangirls every generation, so you can't really blame that on the village. Whatever, Naruto said with a slight pout before taking on a more professional attitude. Are you ready to go, Hokage-sama? Hiruzen couldn't help but smile. He knew of shinobi that seemed to lax in their attitude and taking almost no professionalism, and at the same time he also knew those who took it way too seriously and never let up to have a personality. It was good to see that she was able to have both and knew when to use which. Yes, though this last-minute paperwork took longer than I had hoped. Let us meet our Anbu escort at the north gate and head out. Mind if I ask where we're going? Naruto asked as they both left the Hokage's office. We're headed to a neutral location set up by the forces of Tetsu no Kuni. They take particular interest in peace between the shinobi villages, and with Konoha's history with Iwagakure they were worried a conflict would arise. Hiruzen said in a lecture tone. Naruto, knowing very little of Tetsu no Kuni except that they don't have a shinobi village, began her long list of questions. Neutral territory. After 2 days of continuous travel, they finally made it. The so-called neutral territory was an old fortress that sat between Hai no Kuni and Tsuchi no Kuni. Upon their first day of traveling, the shinobi group met up with the daimyo's escort. The entire time Naruto hadn't seen the daimyo, even though she stuck to the Hokage like glue, never leaving his side except for short bathroom breaks. The daimyo's personal shinobi guard had kept an eye on her, and while it made her feel slightly uneasy, she ignored it and soon their burning gaze was turned away from her. During the traveling, Naruto had continued to pester the elderly Hokage about any information he knew about Tetsu no Kuni. Hiruzen, having a love for teaching, was only too happy to provide the answers for her, even going so far as to tell a few stories of battles even. As they approached the gate, the giant doors were opened and an elderly samurai walked out with a contingent of soldiers in tow. The wore what appeared to be green armor with a long katana at his side. His head had bandages wrapped around it to keep his long gray hair out of the way. His face showed the many years of wisdom and dedication to his profession, his eyes reflecting the many experiences he's had. He also had a long mustache and gray goatee. The man signaled for his men to hold their position as he approached the group. The daimyo walked out of his litter, his shinobi guard quickly forming up around him in a protective circle. Hello Daimyo Dono, my name is Mifune. I was placed in charge of seeing to the protection and peace of this neutral site. The other daimyo has already arrived not but a few moments before yourself along with his cage. I'd like to ask that your guard not make any threatening remarks or such things so that we can all have a peaceful visit. The now identified Mifune said in an elderly voice that demanded respect from years of warfare and experience. The daimyo said nothing, just held his fan in front of his face and slowly started to make his way into the fortress. The Hokage and Naruto were right at his side, Naruto further from him with the elderly Sarutobi between them. Naruto's hearing and chakra sensing picked up a lot of guards, most with very little chakra. However, in a room there were 10 signature that seemed to be much higher than anything. She wanted to ask her sensei about it but decided not to. Most likely they were a guard for the other daimyo, his cage and the cage's guard as well. As the procession made its way to a grand hall, Naruto tried to observe as much as she could through her unique sight. Naruko-chan, what do you see right now? Hiruzen asked as they walked, surprising her that he would break the silence. She also noted that the daimyo seemed to be paying attention as well. I can see 200 separate samurai outside and patrolling inside as well. Other than that, it would seem that there are a total of 11 others in the hall before us. I'd have to guess that they are the Tsuchi no Kuni's daimyo, the Tsuchikage and his guard, as well as a squad of Anbu. There are also only 4 shinobi guarding the daimyo that appear to be separate from the rest. I'd have to guess that they are the daimyo's personal shinobi guard squad. Naruto said. Her head stayed bowed throughout her explanation so no one could see that her eyes were covered. The daimyo took this time to actually speak. Oh my, that is fascinating. How are you capable of telling all of that? It seems like it would be a rather advanced technique for one so young. The man said, never once moving his fan from his face, or even turning his head. Naruto looked towards her sensei for if she should respond or not. When she was given a nod she quickly explained, I'm blind daimyo dono. I see through what I can hear. I listen to the vibrations and sound waves that bounce off everything, and with those my mind can construct an image that allows me to see. I use this to sense and see everything around me. Naruto explained. My, the daimyo said as he finally turned to look at her, to be so young, and blind of all things and still be a kunoichi. I can't even imagine the hardships you must have suffered. Still, if what you say is true, I may just have to offer you a position on my own guard squad when one opens up. You seem remarkably strong, and I believe that strength would be better suited to keeping me and Hai no Kuni safe. Naruto was surprised that an honor like that would ever be bestowed on her, so she quickly bowed low and thanked the man who quickly waved it off. Konohagakure. It had been 4 days since they had left. The meeting, in Naruto's opinion, was boring. A bunch of talking and not a lot of getting anything done. In the end they just decided to resign the old peace agreement and move on. In the middle of it all Naruto had thought she was going to kill the politicians for so much running around the actually subject of peace. In Naruto's mind it was pointless and a huge waste of time. She had however met the Tsuchikage and his granddaughter who was his personal guard. The old man, Onoki, seemed outdated, but he also seemed to know about everything going on. He was calculative and patient, very much unlike his granddaughter. Kuritsuchi seemed like a hot-headed kunoichi. She was brash, and didn't seem to know when to hold her tongue as she spoke out often against her grandfather. Naruto for the life of her just couldn't get how they had such a strong bond when they seemed like complete opposites. She just chalked it up to opposites attract, that they get along so well because they are opposites. As they walked on through the large gate of Konoha's walls, she couldn't help the sigh of relief she released. It was good to be back home. It is good to see the village again, isn't Naruko-chan? Hiruzen asked, as he kept walking through the village, waving at a few people here and there. Yes, it is sensei. There's no place like home. Naruto answered. Well, let's get back to my office. We have a promotion to see to, one ordered by the daimyo himself. Hiruzen said. Naruto was confused. She didn't remember him saying it out loud the entire time she was with him, but she followed her sensei nonetheless. Hokage's office. As they opened the door to Hiruzen's office, they were graced with a mountain of paperwork. Seriously, where the hell did it all come from? Hiruzen just sighed and created 3 clones to start dismantling the paperwork. While his clones did that, he walked over to a cabinet and pulled out a dark green vest and turned to his student. Naruto, in light of both your skills and record, both I and the daimyo himself believe you are ready. From this moment forward I hereby promote you to the rank of Tokubetsu Jonin. Hiruzen said with a beaming smile. Life fucking sucks. Naruto thought. You'd think she'd be happy with her recent promotion. There weren't of shinobi that went from genin to Tokubetsu Jonin. Being given the rank as a kenjutsu and sensory specialist, you'd think she'd be overjoyed by it since it was basically a praising of her skills. Or even happier with her acceptance into Anbu at such a young age. And come to find out that the Anbu commander had been waiting for her to be promoted so he could snatch her up. Again she was filled with so much happiness. With the promotion, Anbu acceptance, a beautiful girlfriend with a fulfilling relationship with said girlfriend, you'd think her life would be really good. Yeah, you'd be wrong. Right now Naruto was currently sitting in the academy. Oh no, not the Anbu Academy. No, she got to do that training at night with her fellow recruits. No, she sat in the Genin Academy class right now. I swear to Kami-sensei, if this is just so I get the academy experience, I'm so going to kill you in a slow and very painful way. And just before you die I'm going to make you do all of the paperwork that built up by yourself. No cage bushins. Naruto thought to the universe in rage, while keeping up the happy attitude she had on. She was currently on a mission of great importance. That mission was to infiltrate the academy and spy on a possible deep-seated traitor, Chunin instructor Mizuki. Information has it that he is working for Orochimaru, but the Hokage wants hard evidence and proof of his treason before he has him arrested and interrogated. So naturally, her being the youngest and at the age to actually pass for an academy student, she was sent it. So she now has to go to these ridiculous classes, but that isn't all. No, because the Hokage was worried she might be recognized by her appearance since she had been with a few other teams. She had to get all new clothes. And did she get to pick them out? Oh no, her girlfriend said she would do it, since she wanted them to match, and her being blind, well, it makes her very fashion challenge. She was right now sitting in class, with a white blouse and pleated knee-length skirt, her hair in pigtails and a bow around her neck. Even she knew her girlfriend was messing with her when she had her dress up in it. She hadn't really cared about what she normally wore, not until she got to training that first night. You'd think Anbu Shinobi would know not to piss off a kunoichi with a really sharp sword, the skill to use said sword, and with the ability to track you down by your chakra. Yeah, she ended up sending 4 people to the infirmary, and still they kept making fun of her. She knew they also took pictures as well, and she was still on the hunt for any photos she might have missed. What didn't help the situation any was that the kids made fun of her for being blind as well. Nah, that was just icing on her fuck my life cake. Many had tried to trip her or mess with her by thinking they could sneak up on her. They at one point also tried to rearrange the classroom as well, in hopes of her bumping into the desks. She started to think she had rage issues after she had almost broken the 3rd student's toes, in 2 weeks, for trying to trip her, or flip the 4th kid who tried and failed to sneak up on her into a desk. She was currently sitting in the back of the class, choosing to keep her head down and not really pay attention to anything. Her senses were on a hair trigger for any danger, but she also had a shadow clone sitting in the academy's ceiling to listen to the suspected traitor, and anything he might say that would give him away. Naruto, are you paying attention? Naruto raised her head slightly to the current instructor. This man had been an irritation like no other. Iruka Amino, Chunin instructor, he was in charge of the class she was placed in as it was his teaching assistant who she was observing. She could tell that he was an honest man, or at least he appeared to be. From what the Hokage told her, he had actually had a bit of a wild streak in him when he was younger. However, time had helped temper that attitude, and he didn't do anything drastic anymore. The Hokage had told her that he was rather dedicated to seeing the next generation flourish. He also had a habit of trying to make sure she would pass no matter what, with remedial lessons. She escaped, of course, but he kept saying that she needed them since she just joined this year. And he was persistent like few she knew. Normally she'd just take them and say, fuck it, so she could keep up her charade, but she normally had training during that time, and she chose getting the crap beat out of her for training any day over the boring remedial lessons that she already knew. Inwardly scowling, she put up her facade and smiled. Yes, sensei? Naruto said in as cheerful of a voice as she could muster. On the inside she was slamming her head against the table, as she felt like an idiot for pretending. Even if it was for a mission, she still had some dignity, and she felt like she was slowly losing that. Good, would you like to answer the question then? Iruka asked, a slight exasperation in his voice. He had kept trying to help her, but she just refused any and all help. He had wondered at times if it was because she was blind, and she thought he was trying to pity her. Naruto's orders were to stay under the radar and try to interfere with the class rankings as little as possible. Sorry Iruka-sensei, I don't know the answer. Naruto said, inwardly gritting her teeth. Kami, if you're listening, please save me from this hell. Naruto thought to the universe. Iruka breathed out a sigh. Alright, see me after class if you would, Naruto. Now does anyone know the answer? After class, the rest of the children filed out of the class and headed home. A few had detention or extra lessons, so they went on their way there as well. Iruka was sitting at the desk in the front of the class, keeping an eye on Naruto. She had proven on numerous occasions that she was a flight risk when extra lessons were mentioned, as he had tried to chase her all over the village until she had somehow managed to lose him after a while. Naruto was dreading talking to the man. She knew he was going to lecture her. What made it worse was she outranked him. He was a Chunin and she was a Jonin, and he was going to lecture her? Cursing her sensei for what felt like the zillionth time since the start of the mission for being so damned persistent, she made her way to the instructor. The girl was really putting all of her patience and self-control into not strangling anyone, and had been successful so far. Well, if you don't count her imagination where she was strangling a good number of people and a few slightly homicidal rampages around the academy with her sword. You wanted to see me, Uruka-sensei? Naruto asked in an innocent tone, as she now stood in front of the teacher. Uruka sighed. Yes, I did. Naruto, you do realize that it's only been a month since you were enrolled in the class and you're currently sitting at the bottom of the class, right? Uruka asked as he looked at her closed eyes. He found himself wondering if she ever opened them up. Yes, sensei, I do. Naruto said. How could she not when she spent all her effort into failing the class, mainly cause she didn't want to be there, and also so she wouldn't mess up the class rankings. The problem came from when the damned man in front of her made it so difficult to fail. Seriously, when did teachers care so much that it became annoying? Look, because of your grades you need to take these extra lessons. I know you may hate it, and trust me, I hate having to give them to you. But at least you'll get the chance to understand the materials, and if you need, I'll even work one-on-one with you. Uruka said, hoping that she would see that he was just trying to help her and that she was in no way special. I understand, sensei, but I just don't need them. You worry too much? Naruto said, trailing off for a second as she began to hear something. Sorry sensei, if you'll excuse me, I need to be somewhere. Naruto said in a hurry as she sped out the door. Uruka was frustrated. She always seemed to do this. She'd up and leave in the middle of one of their conversations. He was briefed by the Hokage that she was able to see using sound and smells as well as giving small pulses of chakra, and he knew she was receiving extra training to help improve it so she could function like everyone else could, but it was interfering with her schoolwork. Guess I'll just have to talk to whoever is teaching her on it. Maybe I can get their help and get her to do the remedial lessons, Uruka said, as he slowly formulated a plan to help his blind student. With Naruto. Naruto was currently speeding across the rooftops, headed for her apartment. She wanted to change fast before she had her Anbu duties, and if what she heard while she was in the classroom was true, then she didn't have much time. Going somewhere, Naru-chan? Naruto quickly whirled around, throwing a swift kick which was easily blocked by the newcomer. You go, I don't have time right now, I have training. Naruto started to say in a slightly irritated tone. Oh come on, you've done nothing with me in over 2 weeks. It's just been that stupid mission and training with you. Besides, I got you out of training today. I told them you weren't feeling well, and that I was going to be taking care of you. Yugo said with a proud smile that could be construed as a smug look. She was currently wearing a standard Jonin outfit as the wind picked up and blew her purple hair behind her, which wasn't really helping with the whole not being a smug look. Yeah, well I'm still upset with you. Naruto said, you dressed me up like a civilian schoolgirl pinup that some creepy perv has up on their wall. Yugo chuckled at that and sheepishly rubbed the back of her head. She had done it on purpose. She thought that she had looked cute and it was sort of fun to dress her girlfriend up like a doll. Oh come on, you know you look cute. I get laughed at the academy. And if I don't get home to change fast enough, everyone at training laughs at me as well. Naruto said, slight venom entering her voice. Yugo, seeing the rage, knew she had to defuse the situation quickly. Otherwise she might not get to spend time with the girl. She had noticed that the girl seemed more irritated than usual since she joined Anbu, but she just chalked it up to stress of doing a mission while going through the Anbu training course and also having to go back to the academy. Moving with blinding speed, she quickly got behind the girl and pulled her against her body. Calm down, Naru-chan, Yugo said in a husky whisper. It was all in a bit of fun. I'll go out and get you some new clothes for tomorrow, okay? Why don't you go home and get changed, while I run and get you something new to wear? In truth, she already had. Sure, it was fun to dress her girlfriend up like a doll, but that was only fun for so long before she knew Naruto would snap. She was kind of hoping she might be able to get her to keep it on a little longer till they made it to the bedroom, but she wasn't willing to risk having her girlfriend angry with her over it. Promise? Naruto said in a soft, defeated tone as she hunched back into the woman, settling herself in the embrace and having her body almost mold itself to the older woman. You know I do, Yugo said as she tightened her arms softly in a comforting gesture around the girl. Naruto let loose a sigh. Alright, well come on. I want to change out of this. If you'd like, we could spar a little. Naruto said, knowing that her girlfriend loved the challenge. While Naruto wasn't on par with her experience with a blade, her ability to hear her opponent's muscles flex so she could almost predict their movements made her a very strong challenge for the violet-haired woman. Feeling the smirk in her hair, she knew she had the violet-haired woman. Fine, but after that we're going out to eat. Hokage-sama, Iruka said with a bow to the elderly Kage. It had been several days since he last talked to Naruto, and he finally had a plan he figured would be foolproof. He was going to talk with her current sensei, the one who was training her to see if together they could help her learn what lessons she needed. All he needed now was to figure out who exactly that sensei was. "Ah, Iruka-kun, how may I help you?" Hiruzen asked in a cheerful tone. His day had been going well, as he had been able to finish the day's mountain of paperwork earlier than he had anticipated. He now had time to read. "Hokage-sama, I'm here to request the name of Naruko Uzumaki's sensei. The one who's been teaching her how to cope with her disability," Iruka said. Hiruzen's attitude immediately did a 180, switching from happy to serious. "For what purpose?" the Sandaime Hokage asked in a reserved tone. Iruka was inwardly shocked. He knew the Hokage was protective of Naruto, but for him to make such a change in his demeanor. It wasn't a secret from the older generations of what she kept sealed away. He had heard rumors that the elderly man had helped her, even given her an apartment to live in after she had been kicked out of the orphanage. Remembering his plan, he quickly gave the elderly man his answer so as to ease any issues there might have been. "Well, Naruto isn't doing all that well in class. I was hoping, with the help of her other sensei, that I might be able to impart how important her education is and get her to take her remedial lessons. I just want to make sure she's getting the material that I'm teaching." Hiruzen stared at the man. In his head he was roaring with laughter though, as he himself had taught Naruto. He had made sure to cover every aspect of her education. Everything from mathematics and science to politics and philosophy. They didn't call him the professor for nothing. "Well, I have actually been the one who's been teaching her to see. I've had a few friends back in the day who had lost their sight due to injuries and such, and I'm teaching her on how they learn to cope," Hiruzen said as he picked up his pipe to take a small drag of the comforting tobacco. Again Iruka was shocked. He was expecting someone higher up the food chain than him, but not at the very top. "Oh, well, is there any way that you might be able to help me impress upon her the need to take these lessons? As I mentioned earlier, she isn't doing very well. Okay, she's actually sitting at the dead last for her year." Hiruzen gave a small chuckle. "I'll see what I can do. Though I won't make any promises. Whether she wants to learn or not, it is up to her to make that decision. All we can do is be her guides as best we can," Hiruzen said. It wasn't all that uncommon for him to give out what the shinobi of Konoha called his sagely advice. It was normally very meaningful, if not a bit vague at times. Guess that's what comes with his many years of experience. Just like every time before that visit, Iruka nodded his head. He made sure to remember what the elderly man said, and hoped to learn from it. "Thank you, Hokage-sama. Now if I may be excused, I have some tests that need grading," Iruka said, turning with a bow and left when he was given permission. Hiruzen sat seated in his chair for a few minutes, giving Iruka time to be well out of hearing distance. "So dead last EH?" Hiruzen asked to the seemingly empty room. "You said not to mess with the rankings," a quiet female voice called out. Hiruzen laughed a hearty laugh. "Haha, that I did. So how is class going?" Hiruzen asked. While he did need her for the mission, he also hoped she would get the experience of being with those her own age, since everyone she'd worked with, both past and present, were far older than her. Hell, her girlfriend was older than her by close to 8 years. "I hate it. It's boring, the kids are annoying and hateful, and half the stuff they teach is completely useless," Naruto ranted from her hidden vantage point. Hiruzen chuckled while suppressing a sigh. The civilian council had gotten their grubby hands on the academy long ago, and he had known about the changing of the curriculum, as they now focused more on civilian matters and the history of the village instead of the shinobi arts and what they might need to know later on in their chosen career path. Because of this change, Hiruzen had introduced a Jonin Sensei teaching program so the new Genin senseis would know what they needed to help their students succeed, or at least that was the hope anyway. "Well, since Iruka asked me to impress upon you the need for education." And with that the Hokage started to lecture about the values of a good education while Naruto groaned and the other Anbu in the room just chuckled at her pain. "I hate my life. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Alright everyone, remember we have a test at the start of next week, so make sure to study over the weekend. Uruka's reminder of a test only brought out groans from the majority of the class. As everyone collected their stuff to leave, Uruka moved towards the door. Slowly all of the students started to file out of the classroom. As Naruto neared the door, she felt a restraining hand on her shoulder. "I need to speak with you, Naruto. Please hang back for a minute," Uruka said. Naruto had to fight down the urge to break his hand and just run out the door. Instead of doing as she wanted, she walked back over to a now empty seat and sat down. When everyone had left, Uruka grabbed one of the chairs and placed it so that he was sitting across the desk from her. "So Naruto, did the Hokage speak with you yesterday?" Uruka asked. He didn't want to be too pushy on getting the specifics. He just wanted to make sure that she would be showing up to the extra lessons from now on. "Hi, he spoke to me about how important my education was. For 2.5 kami forsaken hours. I swear he just loves to hear himself talk sometimes," Naruto thought to herself. "Good, but he also said that if I didn't want to take the extra classes he wasn't going to force me to go to them," the little blonde girl said, quickly interrupting anything the man could say. Uruka just sat there. He knew the Hokage probably said something along those lines since he wasn't big into forcing things. However, he was damned and determined to get this girl to take her education seriously. "I understand. How about we do a compromise then," Uruka said as he was running out of options to use. "You come to one of the remedial lessons, and if your scores improve then we continue along with it. If not, then I will stop worrying so much about you failing out of my class and possibly living a life of poverty and depravity." He finished with a hollow tone. He was going for broke, hoping to either get her there by sympathy or by fear. Naruto chuckled inwardly, so now he's trying to scare me into taking this stupid class. Well, I'll give him one thing. He's probably the most determined man I've known, although that gray-haired one-eyed scarecrow trying to get to the bookstore for that stupid Icha Icha novel makes a close second. Outwardly Naruto smiled. "All right, you have a deal," she said with a large smile. "However, I have a few things I need to do today, so it'll have to be tomorrow, okay, sensei?" Uruka smirked at his success. "All right, we'll just have to find a time that works for you now. But I've kept you long enough, why don't you go on ahead? We can talk more tomorrow." Naruto just hopped up out of the chair and walked out, leaving a grinning Uruka behind her. As she walked toward the exit, she started to formulate a plan to not only get out of training for a day, but get the man off of her back for good. Hee, and he thinks he's so smart. He's just given me a way to get out of him pestering me for good. Man, my luck is never this good, Naruto thought to herself with an almost evil grin as she sped home. When she finally reached her apartment, she opened the door so she could quickly change. However, before she could close the door, an Anbu appeared. "Orders from Hokage-sama. You are to report to him immediately. Be prepared for full deployment," the Anbu said before he quickly used a shunshin to leave. Naruto could tell it was serious for two reasons. One, the Hokage knew she normally had training around now, and he normally wouldn't bother her unless it was important. And second was the grave tone she could hear underlining the normally emotionless voice of the Anbu. Moving swiftly through her apartment, she gathered her gear. After fixing her headband over her eyes and her eyeless kitsune mask over that, she left her apartment and locked the door. "I have a bad feeling about this," Naruto thought to herself as she quickly shunshined away to the Hokage's office. Hokage's office. As Naruto arrived, she quickly filed into her squad, keeping to the very back, hoping not to be noticed or at the very least not be pointed out as the last person to get there. "Alright, I believe everyone is here now that Kitsune has arrived." Hiruzen started. "Yeah, that didn't happen. We have received word that one of our Jonin teams was captured early last night. The squad was ambushed by an unknown enemy, however one member of the squad was able to get away. We were unable to gain any information from him other than the approximate location that the squad might be held at. Unfortunately, we do not know the enemy's strength right now as the man is currently receiving medical treatment and is unconscious. Also, we are down a few teams due to the increase in missions we've had lately, so Anbu Team 3. I know you're all rookies, but you will be getting your first mission ahead of schedule. Team 5 will take lead with 8 and 3 as backup," Hiruzen said in a stern tone. Naruto had seen this tone before, back when she used to guard him. This was his cage tone, as she liked to call it, where he was all business and no longer the fun-loving grandfather everyone normally saw. "Hi," the 8 Anbu and 4 Anbu recruits said before vanishing off to go to work. Hiruzen walked back to his desk. He did not have a good feeling about this mission at all. It was risky, even by Anbu standards. He just hated giving missions like this. And worse yet, he was throwing recruits at it as well. He knew full well of Anbu Team 3's capabilities. They were a sensory unit, meant for recon and hunting missing nin down. With the new Inu as the nose of the group, Taka as its eyes, Kitsune as its wide-range chakra sensor and ears, and Anaguma as the group's stealth expert and captain, they normally would be a very formidable team. So much so, that the Anbu commander was thinking of assigning them to his personal guard full-time, and have them set that way for any other Hokage that would take office unless another team needed a censor. However, Anaguma was a new captain with no real experience at leading, not to mention a record that was filled with bad luck. What made it worse was the others were just beginning their training, having only even had their uniforms for a few months now. No, Hiruzen was far from happy with the situation, but his hands were tied simply due to the overwhelming number of missions the village was receiving. Naruto? Hiruzen muttered to himself as he sat in his chair puffing slowly on his pipe as he looked out over his home. Please come back safely. With the Anbu teams, Comcheck. Hyo here. Taka, here. Inu, here. Kitsune, here. Usagi, here. Kame, here. Habi, here. Osushi, here. Inishishi, here. Saru, here. Anaguma, here. Hato, here. After a moment of silence, as the group sped through the silent forest, Hyo spoke up again. Alright, you all remember the briefing. Team 5, my team, will take lead. Team 3, I want you up front, give us a good sensory range. I want to know whatever we might run into before it hits us. Team 8, you have the rear. Let's move people. Each of the members of the squad were used to this by now, and they all jumped to their assigned orders. It's just how you were in Anbu, when given an order you do it, otherwise the consequences might be dire. Naruto moved into position, and began to focus more on her chakra range. While moving, her hearing wasn't worth as much as her chakra sensitivity. On the outside she acted professional, but on the inside she couldn't help but question if this was the right move for her. She was just a recruit, and one who had only been a recruit for a few months. Not exactly something to brag about, or to send into a hostile situation. Add that to the fact that she hadn't worked with too many of these other Anbu, and this was a recipe for disaster in her opinion. Naruto shook her head. It wouldn't do to have such thoughts right now. Not on a mission, where other people's lives depended on how she performed, and because of that she was damned and determined not to screw up. As if feeling her desperation and anxiety, Anaguma moved to her side and gave her a quick and small pat on the shoulder, as if to tell her that she isn't alone. That or the group is just moving slow for her benefit. She chose to go with the first one. Giving a nod in her captain's way, she refocused her efforts on her range, making sure to pick up any traces of chakra she could. They had been traveling for the past 4 hours in the direction of their information. Each on high alert, and ready for the slightest amount of danger to act. Like they did when a small bobcat had jumped out and they quickly dispatched it before realizing what it was. Poor kitty. Alright, we're close to the area we were told about. We're taking a 5-minute break before you engage anything. So everyone rest up, I want everyone at their best. Hyo's voice came crackling over the wireless communications microphone. The 3 Anbu groups dropped down to the floor of the forest, and took up positions for a quick perimeter. Naruto was currently in the center of the group, making sure that the area was safe and even going so far as to scan the area further as a precaution. Hey, Kitsune. Naruto turned to see Hyo standing not 6 feet from her. Yes, Taiko? Naruto asked, not bothering to turn her head. If the enemy had somehow gotten by her and everyone, she didn't want to point out who their leader was. Hyo was a little irritated that she didn't address him, but if the rumor mill was correct, then she didn't have to, so he didn't take it personally. I need to know if something is true, as it could have affect the mission. Naruto gave a nod to continue. Is it true that you are blind? Naruto didn't even hesitate, as a bat. Come again? Naruto sighed, I'm as blind as a bat. But for that matter, I also see just like one. I don't see the same way you guys do. I see with sounds, smells, and chakra. To be honest, from how the Sandaime described it, I actually see more than you all do. Naruto said in a soft manner. While she had long ago accepted her blindness, that didn't mean it was something she loved to talk about. She was rather happy when most people just treated her the same as anyone else. Hyo nodded. So rumors are correct then. I wonder if she'll keep answering questions though. So is it also true that you're in a relationship with Taiko Neko? Hyo tried to press. How is that relevant to the mission? Naruto asked, now actually facing him. Just curious. Hyo said honestly, hoping that being honest might also help in his favor. Naruto just gave another sigh. I'm not going to say whether we are or aren't. It's really none of your business. Naruto finished with her hands on her hips. That didn't sound like a no to me. Taka said from his perch in the trees. This gained a chuckle out of the group. Hey, is it also true that you're going back to the academy? Saru asked. Oh, she is. We have photos we can show you if you'd like when we get back. Inu said with a hearty laugh. How do you still have any? I thought I got all of them, damn it. Naruto growled out. Yeah, like I tell you. You'd destroy them and ruin all my fun. Inu said while lifting his mask enough to show he was sticking his tongue out. This brought on another set of laughter from the group, even from Naruto. However, it didn't last as Naruto stopped immediately and yelled out, Taka. Look out. The man never saw it coming, as he had been distracted by the conversation. Several kunai embedded themselves in his back. While they were blocked by his armor, the explosive tags wrapped around their handles threw the man from his branch. He landed with thud on the ground, unmoving. Ambush! Naruto yelled out, as she pulled her sword out and prepared to fight. Yep, tack on an ambush, and these past 2 months have been heavenly. Kami, why do you hate me? Naruto thought to herself before she engaged the enemy with her fellow Anbu. Heavy breathing was one of the few things, outside the normal sounds of the forest, that could be heard at the moment. 11 different breaths were being taken at that moment, as the 12th wasn't currently conscious, so it was only a soft rhythmic breathing. What the hell happened? Hyo asked over their comms, not trusting to speak openly after the attack that just happened. Everyone could tell that he was pissed at being caught unaware. Team 3, what happened? Why weren't you able to sense them coming? Neither of the 3 remaining members of the training squad spoke right away. They were supposed to be a sensory squad and they had dropped the ball. Hell, one of their members was now down as well. No chakra? Kitsune muttered softly, however being surrounded by Anbu meant that they all heard her. What was that, Kitsune? Hyo asked, his temper not as bad anymore now that he might be given answers. I can't sense any chakra right now. It's as if there's something blocking all chakra signatures in the area. Even now I can't sense any of you, it's as if you're not even here, but not just you. I can't sense anything, Kitsune said, her face scrunched up in frustration under her mask. Damn it, Hyo murmured out. He became still as he hung his head in thought. Kitsune, is there any other way for you to sense long range? Hyo asked, looking at the smallest member of their Anbu group. Well, she does. Inu started to say, only to be quickly interrupted by Kitsune. That isn't fully tested, Inu. Kitsune growled out, in full knowledge of what he was going to say. What are you two talking about? Hyo asked, putting a little killing intent to stop any arguments from starting up. Kitsune shuffled her feet a bit before heaving a sigh. I've been working on a long-range sound sensory jutsu, but it wasn't completely finished. I can't use it on the move and it takes too long to get all the information to get back, and when I do get all the information back it takes a while to mentally sort everything out. Kitsune explained, her voice upset by having to talk about it. Will it let you see like you used to? Hyo asked. Everyone seemed to stare at the little girl while their captain was questioning her. Kitsune took a moment to think it over. Theoretically, yes it could. However, I've never tested it at such a range, I'm not sure what it might do. Hyo stopped and thought for a moment. He, like every Anbu, knew how dangerous an untested jutsu could be. Hell, it was even against the rules to do so. Even those that seemed completely harmless could backfire and kill. Hyo took a full minute to weigh the pros and cons. Do it, Kitsune. The young kunoichi just stared at him, for a moment before resigning herself to her fate. She had been given an order and she had to follow it. Giving a small wave to everyone to stand back, she began a series of complex hand seals. Banshee no Yobidashi, Banshee's calling, Kitsune muttered, before reaching up and pulling her mask up to uncover her mouth. All of the Anbu watching held breaths in wait. They could feel the chakra she had put into it, and Saru was ready to administer medical aid if she needed it. What no one was expecting was for her to just tilt her head back and open then close her mouth a few times, before replacing her mask and sitting in a lotus meditation position. Kitsune. Hio started to say only to be interrupted with shushes by Inu and Anaguma. Inu, being from the Inuzuka clan, was the only one who was able to hear what she had actually done, so he spoke up. She released a subsonic sound, boosted by her chakra. It goes out a distance that's regulated by how much chakra she puts into the jutsu, then reverberates back to her. With it she was hoping to be able to map out entire areas safely and from a long distance away. What's the maximum range she's gone before? Hio asked. While everything seemed fine and he was prepared to help intervene if necessary, he was also thinking of the possibilities of this jutsu. If what he was hearing correctly, she could, theoretically, take out and neutralize any surprise attacks. He was now looking at the young Kunoichi in a different light, no longer as just a child he was worried he'd have to take care of. She's only tried up to a mile, but she's spot on with her accuracy of it. We were going to slowly work up more, but this mission got in the way. Anaguma said, and it works so much better when you all shut the hell up. Kitsune hissed out. That brought total silence to the group. Kitsune on the other hand was busy trying to piece together the entire layout of over a 5-mile radius in her head. Her mind was slightly overwhelmed by all the information, however she had become accustomed to receiving vast amounts of information to see the area around her. Just not 5 square miles worth, and usually never in a forest with so much wildlife in it. I found them, Kitsune said with a huge exhale. She hadn't realized that she had been holding her breath as well while processing all the information. Where are they, and how many are we up against? Hio asked immediately. He didn't know if she could keep the information in her head long, and those were the most important questions right now. Kitsune forced for a moment before she answered. I'm reading 82 people in the area, not including us. It looks like their encampment is to the northeast, in a small clearing 3.5 miles out. Given sounds coming from 4, along with the presence of chains, 4 of them are our Jonin captives. However, we need to move fast. It sounds like 2 are Kunoichi and they're being dragged off from the others too. Kitsune said in an emotionless tone, going unnoticed by the others except for her team. All of the Anbu tensed at that. They all knew what that could only mean, and they all were forced to try and suppress the rage that was building. Anbu watched out for those under them. They were the best of the best, and they'd be damned if one of the shinobi they were sent to retrieve had to go through that. Kitsune, Yu, Inu, and Hato, go quickly and retrieve the Kunoichi. I want them back safe and whole. Saru, stay with Anaguma and Kame. Look after Taka and make sure he doesn't get worse. I know you said we need to get him back to the village, but see if you can buy us some time with your medical ninjutsu. Everyone else is coming with me. Kitsune, how many are we going to be up against? Hio divided out the orders quickly. Kitsune concentrated for a moment. You'll have about 13 to get through, they in the middle of the clearing in a tent. Hard to see what it's made out of, so I'm going to guess some type of thin cloth. It's big though, so you can't miss it. Hio nodded, good hunting. The captain said before they all dispersed to their orders. The Kunoichi retrieval squad was moving fast through the trees. No one said a word, they were completely focused on their task of getting to the Kunoichi before it was too late. This is Hio, we're 3 minutes from contact. Update again when we have the shinobi. Hio's voice sounded from their earpieces. Hi, Taiko. We'll hit the other group soon. Update as soon as we have secured the Kunoichi. Inu's voice replied, though his voice held a hint of rage instead of his normally joking tone. It wasn't but 2 minutes before they had reached the tree line of clearing the Kunoichi were dragged to. The Anbu operatives could see that they women were putting up a hell of a struggle. Inu spared a quick glance to his teammate, Kitsune, to see how she was doing. He had looked up her past when he found out that they were going to be on the same team. Nothing personal, he did it to the whole team. He just didn't trust easily anymore since his ninkin was Kia. He had found out that she had been raped by the incident report that someone attempted to hide, whether for her sake or not he didn't know. Inu figured this would be a tough situation for her to deal with, though she normally had a grip on her emotions. With the sole exception when they tried to blackmail her with the photos that they had taken, though that was normally just harmless fun. When she placed that mask on, he had only seen a cold, calculative Kunoichi. Someone he would hate to get into a fight with, he wasn't sure he'd win that fight. Looking at the blonde now, and he knew she was pissed. Probably more so than he had ever thought possible. The issue was you couldn't tell if she was pissed or not by usual means. The only way to tell was when her entire presence started to vanish, and your instincts kept telling you to keep an eye on her or run like hell. He wasn't even sure how she did it, but if she wanted to, he knew she could go around completely undetected by hiding her presence from anyone and everyone. Right now, he had to physically look at her to make sure was still there. Hell, he was fighting the urge to make sure it wasn't a genjutsu of her crouched on the tree limb not 3 feet in front of him. "Kitsune," Inu said to get her attention. When she stayed completely still, in a perfect imitation of a statue, he was a little worried at first but continued on nonetheless. "Keep them busy, me and Hato will grab the kunoichi and we'll retreat then." Time froze while he waited for a response. He started to worry that she wasn't focused on the mission anymore. However, she slowly nodded her head in acknowledgement of the orders. Both Anbu shinobi moved quietly through the trees, moving like shadows upon shadows in the dense forest. As they reached their positions, Inu clicked his wireless radio to tell Kitsune to attack. However, as soon as the click went through, before he could even tell her to attack, Kitsune was behind one of the 4 men with her blade draw. A quick flick of her wrist and the man's head was silently severed from his body, a small geyser of blood slowly erupting from the corpse as it fell forward. Before it even touched the ground, Kitsune kicked the severed head into the back of one of the remaining 3, it hitting just right and with enough force to actually leave a very visible intent on his skull, effectively killing the man from trauma to his brain. While she threw his sword into the back of a second man, the tip piercing coming a full 2 inches out of his chest where his heart would be. Wiping out a kunai, Kitsune sent it barreling into the last man's crotch as he turned to see what was going on, the small blade severing his organ. Before he could even register the pain, the kunoichi moved with blinding speed and slammed another kunai into the man's right temple. Inu and Hato stood there stunned. In the span of 4 seconds, the youngest member of their group had annihilated and slaughtered all 4 men. The last man had caught their attention more than the others due to the specific injury that was inflicted, and both almost felt sorry for the man. "Almost. Inu, it's clear." Kitsune's emotionless voice cracked over the headsets. While it might have seemed emotionless, her teammate could hear the complete and utter rage underlining her words. Inu stood there watching the young girl move to the kunoichi and help them up. Quickly shaking his head, he headed down with Hato in tow, who was just as shell-shocked by what he saw as well, and proceeded to help the kunoichi. "Thank you so much for your help," one of the kunoichi said to the Anbu. Giving a nod, Inu turned his back to the kunoichi and crouched down, giving a signal for her to climb on his back. Hato did the same thing for the other kunoichi as well. "Don't worry, another team is currently saving the other 2 members of your team," Inu said in a soft voice. The women had just been through a traumatic experience, and no matter how much training one had, no one was ever prepared to face a possible rape. As Inu hoped, the women seemed to relax a little with the knowledge that their friends would be alright. "Thank you, Anbu-san," both women muttered as they climbed onto the backs of the 2 Anbu and took off into the forest. "So, any ideas on why you were captured?" Inu asked, hoping to keep their minds busy with answering questions instead of dwelling on what almost happened. "Slavery," the one riding on Hato's back said. "They wanted to sell our friends off to another village while me and Kurenai here would be sold to be bastards pleasure thing," the woman said with more venom than a snake could produce. "So you're Kurenai Yuhi-eh?" Inu asked, though he already knew who the kunoichi were. Both were rather infamous for being 2 of the most beautiful kunoichi in the village. Kurenai was known for being generally cold towards men as well as being the best user of genjutsu in the village, while the other one was Enko Mitarashi, who was known for just being sadistic towards everyone at times. While Kurenai was a recently promoted jonin, not having the rank for more than 7 months, Enko had taken the Anbu course and passed a year ago. Inu guessed that being in T and I had slowed down her training enough that she was able to be captured, or they used her teammates against her. Kurenai, instead of answering, chose to look at the young Anbu who was now currently leading them away. She had been under the man who had his head cut off, and her outfit was currently soaked in the vile man's blood. The horror of seeing her almost rapist killed wasn't what caught her eye, it wasn't even the fact that she was obviously very young. It was how she moved with such grace and fluidity, how her very presence seemed to escape her notice, even now, or maybe it was the fact that the girl had saved her from a rapist. Inu stole a quick glance at the woman on his back when she didn't respond, and he noticed her gaze on his teammate. He also wasn't the only one, as the other two shinobi had also looked at her when she didn't respond. Kurenai then leaned forward to try and whisper Inu's ear, "Isn't she a little young to be an ANBU, or is she just short? I'm not trying to be mean, just curious." Inu's mind, for a moment, couldn't think. Suddenly he burst out laughing. "Oh Kami," someone actually asked. He kept saying as he tried to breathe through his fits of laughter. While laughing he somehow was able to keep up with the other two Anbu and not drop from the trees. Kitsune on the other hand almost missed her landing on a tree limb. Not even turning to dignify the question, she just sent the message that they were on their way back. Afterwards she proceeded to sulk a little about being called short as she kept jumping with everyone else, occasionally muttering, "I'm not short." As they reached the area that they were supposed to regroup at, Kitsune's head perked up. Inu seeing this asked what was going on. "I can sense again?" Kitsune said in confused yet happy tone. Inu's brow furrowed, but chose not to question it further. He may be your teammate, but he didn't know a lot about chakra sensing, so it would be useless for him to ask, not to mention he needed to keep his mind focused on his task. As they dropped down from the trees to where they had left the injured, they quickly had the kunoichi sit down so Saru take quick scans to make sure they were alright. He found that they both had a few bruises, and Kurenai's ankle was tweaked a little but nothing too bad. Kitsune, Inu, and Hato all took up defensive positions around the group, with Kitsune being the closest to the group, effectively putting herself in the middle so she could extend her range to cover as much as she could. They only had to wait 5 minutes when the others showed up. "Kitsune," Hyo asked, quickly addressing the younger Anbu, "are you still unable to sense chakra?" The young blonde shook her head in the negative. "No, for some reason I was suddenly able to sense chakra a few minutes ago," Kitsune reported, still confused on the matter herself. We destroyed a set of seals a few minutes ago before we left their camp. Maybe that's what was causing it. Either way, we made a quick sketch of it and we'll leave it for the intelligence division to figure it out. Now give me a chakra sensory perimeter, a mile out at least. Inu, your lead. Get us back to the village quickly and make sure we don't run across any of their trails. Command will probably send in hunter squads to take these guys out, so we don't need to fight them anymore. We just need get back to the village in one piece. Move out. Hi. Every Anbu in the clearing said as they gave a quick salute. Saru helped Anaguma picked up Taka and situated him properly on his back, while everyone moved into a defensive formation around the ex-hostages and the wounded. It took them close to 5 hours to get back, and when they did everyone seemed to just sigh all at once in relief that their mission was over. Alright everyone, you know the drill by now. I want reports from everyone before the end of tomorrow. Otherwise you're all off duty as soon as the Hokage lets us go. Hyo said in a rather tired tone. He wasn't used to getting ambushed or having to lead more than just his team, so he was outside of his comfort zone most of the time and felt exhausted. Everyone just nodded as they made their way to the Hokage's office, Saru and Anaguma leaving the group to take Taka to the infirmary. As they approached their leader's office, they noticed another group was currently inside, so Hyo took this time to ask everyone individually what happened so he could give a full report instead of having to play hot potato with the answers. He wasn't able to fully finish before the doors opened and a team, Chunin judging by the vests, walked out and left down the hallway. And that's when we returned back to the village, Hyo said, finishing his verbal report. It took close to an hour to get everything out, and just about everyone, with the exception of the Hokage, seemed restless standing there for so long. Hiruzen was currently seated in his chair, puffing away at his pipe more than usual. Groups of missing nin were always a problem, but they usually stayed in smaller groups so as to not attract a lot of attention from the villages. Then there was the seal. And you're absolutely sure this was the seal what was engraved in the ground at the camp? Hiruzen asked as he held up the drawing he was given. Hi, was the only response Hyo gave. Hiruzen said, mulling over the idea on how someone had gotten such a complex seal. Hokage-sama, if I might ask, what is so special about that seal? Kurenai asked. She had been listening to everything that was being said so far and she was able to notice that their cage was disturbed by the seal. She didn't know anything about seals outside of the standard storage scroll or explosive note. This seal, Hiruzen said, holding the drawing up for everyone to see, is part of a barrier seal. Unlike most barriers that hold out physical objects, this is a masking barrier. It completely cloaks any and all chakra signatures inside its radius. It was developed several years back by the Yondaime to be used to hide the village. However, there was a drawback that he could never work out. While all chakra signatures couldn't be sensed at all from the outside, you also couldn't sense them from the inside as well, which as all of you could figure out in a shinobi village would be dangerous. Due to that factor, as well as the enormous amount of chakra needed to power the seal, it was never put into use. The Sandaime finished his explanation. However, there were only 3 people who knew of the seal outside of Minato and Kushina. Myself, Jiraiya, and Orochimaru. I know Jiraiya wouldn't sell this, and I haven't seen it in years, so Orochimaru must be involved somehow. Hiruzen thought to himself. While he was thinking, the shinobi stood at attention waiting to be dismissed. After a few moments, Kitsune quietly scuffed her boot on the ground, which seemed to draw him out of his thoughts. "Oh, my apologies. I'm holding you all up," Hiruzen said with a small smile. "You know the standard protocol for paperwork. Anbu, you are dismissed. Jonin, I want all of you to get a full physical tomorrow, so I know you all are in good health." "Dismissed," the Sandaime said with a small wave of his hand. The Anbu each gave a quick salute and then quickly left the office via Shunshin. Knock, knock, knock. Yugo looked up from the dinner she was making, and moved to answer her door. She figured it was her girlfriend that had finally gotten back from Anbu HQ. It wasn't hard to hear of such a large group of Anbu coming back since normally they only operated in small 4-man teams. Yugo had heard that the mission hadn't gone quite well, and she wanted to do something nice for her younger girlfriend. While cooking wasn't a specialty of hers, okay, she absolutely sucked at it and normally ate out. She did know how to make a few dishes, and the thought of just staying in with Naruto was enough for her to cook. As she opened the door, Yugo was privy to the sight of Naruto in a small white tank top with black shorts. However, it wasn't the clothing that surprised her. It was the fact that Naruto looked to barely be holding herself and her sword up. "Naru-chan?" Yugo said in disbelief at the state the blonde was in, as she quickly moved to support the girl. Naruto gave a weak smile. "Hey Yu-chan. Sorry I was stupid on the mission and I'm starting to feel the effects right now." Naruto said in her usual caring voice that she generally kept reserved for Yugo or private moments with the Hokage. "What happened?" Yugo asked in a worried tone, as she moved the girl inside and closed the door behind her. Sitting Naruto in a chair at her table, once she was settled, Yugo quickly rushed to get her a glass of water. "We went after the squad like we were supposed to. We ended up getting ambushed before we could get to them," Naruto said as she stopped to chug the water down. Her body was sore, and she was still sweating even after her armor was removed. Yugo looked at her stunned. It was unheard of for Naruto to be caught surprised, and she'd know since she's constantly trying to catch the girl unaware. "How did you get ambushed?" Yugo asked, partially worried as well as curious. "They had seals set up that stopped my ability to sense any chakra, and you know how well my sound sensory abilities become when I'm forced to just use my hearing on the move," Naruto said as she leaned back into her chair. Yugo just nodded. Naruto's ability to sense become reduced by a great deal simply because all the sounds tend to mesh together when she's moving at a high rate of speed that Anbu normally do. Anyway, Taka was injured during that attack. Hyo told me to use my new wide-range jutsu, and it took more out of me than I'd care to admit, more than it ever should really," Naruto said in a tired tone as she tried to keep awake. Her body however just wanted her to sleep. Yugo however was working on keeping her rage down right now. Use of an untested jutsu is against protocol within Anbu, and she knew Hyo knew that. To order someone to use an untested jutsu was bad, but to order someone who wasn't even officially Anbu yet. Yugo was going to go to the Anbu commander with this knowledge when she was on duty next. Naruto, unaware of Yugo's inner raging, continued on with her story. "When I was able to locate where they were, me and 2 others went to get 2 of them while Hyo and another squad went after another 2. The 2 we were after turned out to be the kunoichi of the group. When my group arrived on the scene, they were about to be raped, or they were getting ready to rape the kunoichi. Either way, I ended up losing it. I used my chakra to help me move as fast as possible and quickly killed the enemy. But it took everything I had left to get back after the adrenaline wore off." Naruto finished, her tone conveying how truly tired she was. Yugo moved to stand behind her girlfriend and slowly started to massage her shoulders and neck, prompting a soft moan from the young blonde. "Well, why don't you go and take a shower then, while I finish up dinner?" You can stay the night here instead of going back to your place. Yugo said in a soft whispers as she continued her ministrations on Naruto's shoulders. The young girl could do nothing but nod her head slowly, though she didn't move at all to do as she was supposed to. Yugo giggled before removing her hands and walking towards the stove. Go on. I'm sure dinner will be ready by the time you get out. The purple-haired woman said with her back to the blonde. With a soft groan, Naruto hauled herself out of the chair and headed through the door that led to her girlfriend's single bedroom and bathroom, leaving her sword by the door. Yugo hummed softly to herself, no tune really coming to mind, so it kept switching rhythm over and over. She stirred the stew she was making when the shower turned on. Checking the stew, she figured she had about 20 minutes left before it was done. Perfect time for Naruto to finish her shower. So to pass the time, she walked over to a cabinet by the front door and pulled out her sword cleaning kit. Grabbing Naruto's blade, she went about cleansing the blade and using a polish to keep it from rusting. As her hands went about the methodical movements she was used to after years of doing them, her mind was allowed to slip away and her thoughts allowed to turn towards her next problem. He was a pain in the ass, even on his good days. Since he's been made Enbu captain, there have been serious inquiries about his ability to take charge. He doesn't seem to like to follow the rules at all, and normally ends up getting his squad members hurt. There have been numerous occasions of this. However, his record normally withstood those questions. He normally took the higher risk missions that even most Enbu normally wouldn't want. Hyo seemed to like the danger of those missions, so much so that many have questioned whether he's actually trying to commit suicide via mission. He wouldn't be the first to make the attempt either if that was the case. Knock, knock, knock. Yugo's mind quickly came back to the present, and her hands stilled on the blade she had been working over for the last 15 minutes. Who would be visiting me at this time of the night? The purple-haired Kunoichi asked herself. Most of her friends normally knew not to bother her this late, since she normally would be asleep due to her Anbu duties. Deciding it was better just to figure it out than to try to guess, Yugo walked over to the door and opened it. There stood two of her best friends, though not dressed as they normally were. Kurenai looked like hell while she wore a long-sleeve shirt with what looked to be sweatpants, and Anko was wearing something close to it as well, wearing a short-sleeve shirt instead of a long. Yugo started to say. She could tell something was up by the fact that they were dressed like that. Well, that and the two big bottles of sake that Anko had in her hands also clued her in as well. Anko didn't wait for any question, just sidestepped the purple-haired woman and walked into the apartment, followed by Kurenai. Sorry Yu-chan, we just need to really forget out mission. So we thought we'd all drink until we hate ourselves tomorrow. Anko said, trying and failing to keep her usual childlike manner. Wait, I didn't say you could come in, damn it. Yugo exclaimed, as she tried to cut the two women off, only to turn to see them already sitting at her table. Yugo hadn't told them about her relationship with Naruto. Hell, most people didn't know anything about the blonde girl. The Hokage had been very adamant about keeping everything pertaining to Naruto top secret until she came of proper age and well outside of anyone's possible grasp. He worried about the reaction of the civilians and he refused to allow his advisors to get the hands on her. So Yugo had kept their relationship a secret from everyone. While she trusted her friends, she also knew them very well. Anko, while very loyal, also tended to drink a lot with her T&I buddies, which led to her spilling other secrets on accident as well. Kurenai she knew wouldn't approve at all. She was a more prim and proper woman, and being with someone several years, closer to 9 years your junior, was not something she would like. Come on Yu-chan. You rarely hang out with us anymore. You've been too caught up in your Anbu duties to hang with us at all. Anko whined. Yugo winced. It was true she had been rather busy the last couple of months. Taking a deep breath, Yugo addressed the two women. Look, I know that I've been busy, but seriously. Right now is not a good time. Yugo tried to stress. Anko just snorted, and looked to be about to retort. However, she wasn't able to as the door to Yugo's bedroom opened up to reveal Naruto with her head covered by a towel. She was wearing similar clothing she had on earlier, only her tank top was a hunter green now. Yugo was mentally berating herself for not paying attention to whether or not the shower had still been going. Naruto just stood there. The only movement was her hands that kept trying to towel dry her hair. She moved it so the towel was around the back of her neck, her bangs falling so they kept her eyes covered, and moved towards the kitchen, completely ignoring the three women. Yugo looked at her two friends to gauge their reactions. Anko looked really confused, while Kurenai looked at Naruto with a look that almost looked like a realization. Naruto walked over to a cabinet and pulled out 4 glasses and set them on the counter. Grabbing one, she walked over to the sink and filled it with water before draining it and refilling it again. This time she nursed the water, leaving the sounds of her drinking the only sound that broke the awkward silence. However, the silence didn't last long since Anko was around. "Who the fuck are you?" Anko demanded, standing up from her chair with her hands planted on the table. Yugo felt anger start to swell inside her at her friend's rude comment towards her girlfriend. However, before she could say a single word, Naruto spoke up. "It's not polite to ask someone's name without giving your own first," Naruto said in her usual emotionless tone, as she set her half-drank glass down on the counter. Naruto's bangs obscured her eyes from everyone in the room as she stared at Anko. Anko growled a little at the young girl, however she didn't make any attempt to move for her stance. Naruto just walked over to the table and grabbed her cleaned blade and returned it to its sheath. While the girl moved slowly to place it by the door, everything resumed its awkward silence. After the sword was placed, Naruto continued to move around the kitchen while everyone just stared at her. It wasn't until she had a bowl of the stew Yugo was making that Anko spoke up again. "Alright, fine, my name is Anko Mitarashi, what's yours?" Anko asked through her gritted teeth. Naruto swallowed a spoonful of the stew slowly before turning her head. "Naruto Uzumaki, a pleasure," Naruto said, keeping to her usual monotone voice she used with everyone but the Hokage and Yugo, before she went back to eating. Yugo just stood there for another moment before sighing and went and grabbed some of the stew for herself. Can I ask why you are here?" Kurenai asked, looking at the blonde. "I don't know, can you?" Naruto inquired with a small tilt to her head as she raised another spoonful to her mouth. Kurenai's mouth fell open at slightly rude comment. "Be nice," Yugo said, walking right behind Naruto and tapping her on the head with her own spoon. Naruto just shrugged and continued to eat. "Okay, why are you here?" Kurenai asked more directly this time, in a much more forceful tone. For a moment as Naruto continued to eat, she thought she was just going to ignore her. "I could ask you the same thing," Naruto said after swallowing what food was in her mouth. That comment made Kurenai grit her teeth in anger. "I'm here to talk with a good friend. What's your excuse?" Kurenai forcefully asked, finding it very hard to stop from yelling at the tiny girl. Yugo had stopped moving and was glaring daggers at the red-eyed Jonin. However, she wasn't being watched by anyone as Anko too had her eyes on Naruto. Naruto just looked in Yugo's way, a silent question passing between the two. After a moment of silence, which seemed to tax Kurenai of all her patience, Yugo sighed and nodded to the blonde. "I'm here visiting my girlfriend," Naruto said simply and hopped up to get another bowl of food, completely ignoring the responses of the two guests. Of course that would be assuming they had responses, when in fact both just froze. If it wasn't for the fact that Naruto could hear their shallow breathing and hearts rapidly beating, she would have thought that they had become statues. 4 bowl for Naruto and 2 for Yugo later, and the two Jonin finally had a response. "What the hell?" Anko and Kurenai exclaimed loudly. Naruto just yawned in response as she pushed her bowl away. "Why don't you go lay down, Naru-chan?" Yugo said in a soft tone, standing up and grabbing the dishes. That had both other Jonin looking between their friend and Naruto. Naruto just nodded and lazily walked into the bedroom, quietly closing the door behind her. When the click of the door was heard, both Jonin turned to the Anbu captain and began demanding answers. "What the hell is going on? Is what she said true? Yeah, are you dating her? How did you even meet? You do realize you're a cradle robber, right? How old is she? Is this because Hayate broke up with you?" You can probably imagine which woman asked which question. Yugo just stayed silent while they continued asking their questions without waiting for answers. As the questions kept coming, she moved to do the dishes. By the time she was finished, they were silently waiting for their answers. "Okay, yes, I am dating her. We've known each other for a long time now, but if you must know, I met her in the hospital. As for if this is because Hayate broke up with me, that was a long time ago and I've been over it," Yugo said without turning around. "What about my questions?" Anko exclaimed a little louder than what she meant to. "Come up with less immature questions and I'll answer them," Yugo said, not at all fazed by her friend's line of questioning. Fine, does she know about your condition? Anko asked. It had been the source of a lot of Yugo's issues in the past. People could be very mean, and Yugo had found that out early on. Yes, she does, and she's told me she doesn't care, Yugo said, as she finished drying the dishes and put them away. She knew her friends were only questioning it because they cared, but it still angered her a little that they were questioning her relationship with Naruto. How old is she? Yugo turned around and looked at Kurenai. This, she knew, was going to be the hardest part. Kurenai was always too proper sometimes, especially with their line of work. However, it was because of this unwavering strength she had to hold to her personal beliefs that had allowed for such a strong friendship between them. The other problem was the fact that, despite her age, Naruto was ranked as high as all of them. However, due to orders she had personally received, as well as the rest of the Anbu Corps, she wasn't allowed to talk about that. Or any of her missions at the moment. Hell, she wasn't even allowed to talk about any of her combat skills either. So Yugo chose what she could say without lying to her friends. She's currently at the academy, graduating year. Yugo said, choosing to give them only part of the information. Yugo could see the slight disgust building in her friend's eyes before it was reined in, as well as any other emotions her face might have leaked. Leaning back in the chair, Kurenai began to think on the situation at hand. That was the thing about Kurenai, didn't matter what the situation was in, she would always try to look at it from an objective point of view. Anko, however, was not going to think on it too much. She had seen the harsher side of their job, so age to her meant nothing. Anko had a different question, however. Is there something wrong with her face? 'Cause she kept it hidden the entire time she was here, Anko asked, curiosity getting the better of her. Yugo sighed. Naruto doesn't like a lot of people knowing because they treat her differently when they find out, so if you see her again I suggest you don't. Truth be told, she's blind, Yugo said in a slightly defeated tone. While she knew that her girlfriend was fine with being blind, as well as turned it into her own advantage against everyone, she also knew it was a great burden to live with. It made her life hard, even if she refused to show it. Both of the women looked at her in surprise. Anko was the first to come out of it, however. She's blind and she's still going to the academy? The Hokage is okay with having a blind shinobi? Yugo chuckled. Oh, if they only knew that Naruto could see better than most of the shinobi corps. The Anbu captain thought smugly. The Hokage actually was the one who helped enroll her. He taught her how to see without the use of her eyes. Yugo said out loud. Anko accepted this since, like most, she knew how smart the Hokage was, and if anyone had a way to see again it would be him. Kurenai had a curious look on her face, however kept her question on, how, to herself. Okay, that's enough questions. The early shift tomorrow, so we can have our talk on why you brought 2 giant bottles of booze with you tomorrow, Yugo said while trying to usher them out. As the 2 guests made their way to the door, Kurenai turned to look her friend in the eye before asking one last question, one last one. Are you happy? Kurenai asked, studying her friend's face and reactions for any sigh of lying. Yes, Yugo stated simply, however her face showed more love than either Anko or Kurenai had seen before. Nodding at the answer, Kurenai grabbed Anko and took off with her. Yugo just breathed a sigh of relief as she locked the door. Quickly making her way to her bedroom, she took notice that Naruto was fast asleep in just her panties, her clothes folded neatly on the dresser. After she quickly stripped so she was only in her boy's short panties, she snuggled up to Naruto's back and slowly followed her girlfriend into the land of dreams. Ah! Naruto screamed out, tears running down her face as she gasped for air. She could feel that she was covered in a cold sweat, but she didn't know where she was at all. She was too worked up to see properly. She felt arms around her body and she began struggling against the person. Shish, it's okay, Naru-chan. I've got you, you're safe. Come back to me, baby. A soothing voice cooed out softly next to her ear that her body seemed to relax to. However, despite her body's reaction to calm, she felt herself tense until the memories of what happened and where she was came flooding back to her. As the memories of last night came back to her, her body stilled and she sobbed into the person's chest. She was at her girlfriend's apartment. She had just come home from a quick Anbu mission despite her being just a recruit. She had saved those women from being raped. She also remembered falling asleep after a tense dinner with what she assumed were Yugo's friends who also just happened to be the women she had saved on the mission. I'm sorry, Naruto repeated softly as she tried to calm her heartbeat and stop the flow of tears that continued to fall uninterrupted. It took several long minutes for Naruto to finally gain control over her emotions again. The entire time Yugo refused to let go of the blonde. This wasn't the first time this had happened, though it was becoming more and more infrequent over the years. Yugo had been through this many times over the years, and though not since they've been together, she was still used to helping Naruto out with it. When Naruto had been brought to the hospital after her rape, she had refused to have anyone touch her. Not the doctors, even the female ones, not the nurses or even the Hokage. Naruto grabbed anything she could and would throw it at anyone who tried to enter her room. It would have been almost comical had it not been the fear she radiated at the time or the scalpels she had gotten a hold of. Yugo had just started her Anbu training not even a month prior to that incident, but she somehow was able to get the frightened little girl to trust her. Of course, during that course of time she had also been hit with a tray of thankfully gauze, but still the tray kind of hurt. Ever since then she's tried to stick as close to her as possible, and thanks to her being so close to the Hokage she was generally able to. She felt somewhat responsible for the blonde, and she was also one of two people Naruto truly interacted with emotionally. Everyone else she kept at an arm's length, and after she was trained that length became the length of her blade. Yugo and the Hokage were the only ones she ever allowed to get close to her, and it even took them a while for her to actually let them physically touch her. Yugo to this day is the only one Naruto will allow near her during times of weakness like this. The blonde girl just refused to allow anyone in. The last person to try ended up with several kunai in them, and had it not been that she was too worked up to see correctly they would have died. Yugo just continued to rock the shaking blonde for a while longer, until she stopped shaking and the purple-haired woman noticed she had fallen back into a light sleep. Heaving a sigh, Yugo looked over to her alarm clock and took note of the time. 4 a.m. Groaning as her body really didn't want her to get up and moving this early, she softly climbed over her girlfriend, being careful of Naruto so as not to disturb the blonde from her much-needed rest. Quickly adjusting the clock's alarm to wake the blonde up for school, she walked over to her bathroom for a shower and to start her morning routine. It was times like these that Yugo wondered why she was still Anbu. She wasn't a morning person, you can just ask her squad. She got really grumpy whenever she had to wake up early. The higher-ups tried to get her to stop that, but after the second captain went to the hospital for disturbing her slumber prematurely they quickly stopped and just made sure to send orders for her to get up early enough. Her squad had generally found it funny whenever an enemy woke her up. They never lasted that long. As Yugo finished up her shower, she quickly towel-dried and left the bathroom. Throwing the towel into the hamper by her bathroom door, she walked over to her dresser and pulled on her underwear and sports bra before moving silently to the middle of the room. Yugo dropped to the ground and started warming her body up. She had found that so long as she worked her body a little, she woke up just fine instead of continually being grumpy. Well, mostly. After a small set of 100 push-ups and sit-ups, Yugo went to her closet and dressed in her uniform. As she walked out she noticed Naruto sitting up, her hair a little wild from sleep. Another nightmare? Yugo asked, concern lacing her voice. She hadn't heard any screaming, but that didn't mean much when it came to Naruto's nightmares. At times she could hold in the screams and others she'd thrash around screaming bloody murder like earlier that night. Naruto just shook her head, just can't sleep is all. I mean I feel tired, don't get me wrong, but after that nightmare my body just won't fully relax. I might as well get up now anyway. Naruto said in a tired tone. Yugo couldn't help but worry for her young girlfriend. You don't have to. You have to make sure you get to the academy today anyway, so rest a little longer. Yugo said with worry for her girlfriend. I'd just end up laying here doing nothing while my thoughts tried to drive me insane. Best to keep my mind moving. I've got to pick up my report scrolls anyway and I'll probably go sit in the park for a bit. The cold air and quiet might do me some good, Naruto said as she pushed herself out of the bed. Yugo nodded in acceptance, though internally she wanted to protest at her needing rest. But with her current mission it wasn't like she needed to be able to fight. So they have your scrolls in then? Yugo asked as she double-checked her armor, making sure all of the straps were properly done. Naruto was given special scrolls that had slightly raised lines on them so she could write straight for her reports and not have the report a giant jumbled mess. And since she handwrote everything which left indents on the paper, she was able to actually give her reports like everyone else. It was rather comical when she handed in her first one and it was neatly done. Everyone except the Hokage and Yugo had questioned if she was really blind or not. The fact that she could see everything around her didn't help those assumptions either. Yeah, I was told just before we left that they were. Naruto said as she walked over to the dresser where she had left her clothes neatly folded and proceeded to dress. Good, I have to go see Ryu about something. I'll see you later tonight? Yugo asked as she moved to leave the room, stopping at the doorway to look at her girlfriend as she dressed. Aren't you drinking with your friends tonight? Naruto asked as she finished getting dressed and grabbed a nearby brush to get her hair into a small manageable state. She was moving rather sluggishly, but getting only 5 hours of sleep after a hard day of work will do that to a person. Shit, thanks for reminding me, I almost forgot. Yugo said as she left the room to quickly grab something to eat. When you get back from your shift, sort your laundry and drop it off at my place. I'll do it tonight while you're out. Naruto called to Yugo, who was quickly digging through her refrigerator for food for the both of them. You don't have to do that. Yugo called back as she placed a few things on the counter to make a quick breakfast. It'll be after training, so it'll be a nice distraction. Besides, my apartment has a washer and dryer, yours doesn't. Naruto said as she walked into the kitchen to see her girlfriend starting to cook breakfast. She walked over to the counter and grabbed the remaining bread that Yugo normally bought from the nearby bakery every couple of days. Placing that on the table, she went to grab butter and jam. I know that, but you don't have to do the laundry. Why don't you try to make a few friends at the academy so you'll have people your own age to hang out with? Yugo questioned, cooking some eggs quickly for the two of them. Yeah, because everyone wants to be friends with the blind Kyuubi Jinchuriki, who's the dead last of the class. You have no idea how much I hate this mission. Honestly, did you know that Iruka wants me to take supplementary lessons? Naruto said as she grabbed a couple of glasses and filled them with milk for the both of them, as Yugo was plating the food. You could give them a chance? Yugo said softly, ignoring the bit around Iruka, knowing that she would hear her, but at the same time hoping it would be ignored. She knew Naruto didn't get along with others her own age, but she didn't want her to grow up and not have anyone who could possibly relate to what she was going through. In hindsight, no one her age was an Anbu-level Kunoichi, who was blind, held a monstrous fox of apocalyptic power inside them, and who had been raped, so of course there was almost no place for friendship bonding to take place in that sense. Naruto was quiet for a moment as they both sat down to eat. Naruto knew she needed to be a little more sociable, but she could barely stand being around anyone for too long. Anything someone said under their breath, or when they thought she was out of earshot, she heard, and it was always hurtful. Add to the fact that Naruto had learned not to trust easily, and it was really hard for her to interact in society, let alone children whose whole opinion is based more on the parents' opinions than their own observations. I'll try, Naruto mumbled. If there was one thing she hated more than anything, it was disappointing her girlfriend, and if she wanted her to try to give the children a chance, then she'd at least make some effort. Yugo beamed with happiness. Good. Now, I'll see you later tonight, I have to go speak with Ryu. Yugo said as she stood up, leaving her plate for Naruto to clean up. Walking by Naruto, she gave her a quick peck and moved for the door. You're drinking with your friends tonight? Naruto called after the purple-haired woman as she had already left. Naruto for a moment thought she had forgot again, only to hear a far-off curse which brought a chuckle out of her. What would she do without me? Naruto asked herself as she quickly cleaned up their breakfast so she herself could head out. Yugo arrived quickly at Anbu HQ, and made her way inside into the lower levels where she knew the commander's office was. She hated coming down this low, it was always so depressing, and reminded her that the HQ was really just a big bunker. The top levels, though still dull in her opinion, were at least a little livelier and had some form of human elements. Down here, you'd be lucky if you actually saw anyone since so few people were allowed down on the lower levels. As she approached Ryu's office, she stopped and knocked on the door. She went inside after hearing a gruff, "Enter." Yugo opens the door and walks in, making sure to close the door firmly behind her. "Ryu-sama, I have something I need to report," Yugo said in a very formal manner, using the tone she normally reserves for when she's commanding her squad. The Anbu commander looked at her for a moment before motioning for her to take a seat in one of the chairs in front of the desk he was currently situated in. "And what about this report has you so flustered?" Ryu asked, his voice distorted by the mask that he never took off. No one had seen the Anbu commander's face except the Hokage, and with the balaclava he wore, you couldn't even tell what his hair color was. "Sir, it's about Hyo. I thought you should know that he openly ordered one of those under his command to use a jutsu that wasn't fully ready for use. In fact, I've been informed that it was still in the experimental stage," Yugo said, waiting for her commander's judgment. She knew this was a serious accusation, as it could very well end an ANBU's career as a captain, as it calls into question their ability to make the correct choice on the battlefield, regardless of whether or not the gamble paid off. Anbu were based on skill, not luck, and if you didn't have it then it normally only granted people the loss of their lives. Ryu didn't move, he just stared at the woman for a moment. Or at least she threw he was staring at her, was really hard to tell with the mask he never took off. "I'm going to guess this has to do with the mission where he ordered Kitsune to use a jutsu that hasn't gotten the pass to be field ready, am I correct?" The masked nin asked. Gaining a nod from the purple-haired woman he sighed, "Yes. I was informed of that last night as well by Anaguma." He was concerned, as you seem to be as well, about Hyo's orders. "I will tell you what I told him. Hyo will undergo review before anything else. I know he doesn't have the best reputation on the force, but he is good at what he does. Now however he has put someone's life deliberately at risk, as no one would have known what would have happened had the jutsu backfired. From what Kitsune's squad mates tell me is that she did use a lot more chakra than she ever had, so it was a possibility of it completely draining her, possibly even costing her more. I will make sure that I get to the bottom of why he ordered to do so, even after being told that it wasn't ready for field use, but I will also not drag someone, who possibly just didn't have any other choice, through the mud on a simple hunch. I do appreciate you informing of this though. How was Kitsune? I'm assuming she went to your place last night?" Ryu asked at the end, effectively putting the Hyo topic to bed and switching up the topic. Yugo knew that Ryu knew of her relationship with Naruto. It's almost impossible to get anything by the man. He seemed to know everything going on in Konoha in almost frightening detail. Yes, she did. The mission had taken a lot out of her. She was running on empty when she arrived at my apartment. On top of that, the mission ended up bringing back her nightmares, though I think it was mainly due to how close to home the mission had come. Yugo said, referring to Naruto's own rape. "Damn," Ryu muttered the curse in his distorted voice. "I was hoping she had healed from that by now, but I also suspected that it might not. She's one of the best. Even if she hasn't finished the Anbu training yet, everyone is able to see it, and I hate to see her suffer. Do inform me if it gets worse, as I may have to employ a Yamanaka to help ease her mental state, or I may just have to completely keep her off the force, as it is likely she'll come across a similar situation and I can't have one of my men falling apart." Ryu said. Yugo understood completely. If she couldn't perform during certain situations or lost control during those same situations, she wouldn't be effective in Anbu. "Hi, I will," Yugo said with a nod, although she was rather reluctant. It felt as if she was spying on her own girlfriend, and that didn't sit well with her. Ryu nodded. "You're dismissed. Don't forget about your patrol, as well as your squad is covering the Hokage during the afternoon shift." "Hi," Yugo said as she stood up and gave her commander a bow and then left the office. Naruto was walking down one of the side streets, heading to her destination and just enjoying the peace and quiet. The cool morning air was also nice, as it helped keep her mind at peace by adding another layer of serenity. She had taken as much time as she could for her procrastination. She had run back to her place, taken a long shower and put on new clothes. She even spent 20 minutes brushing her hair out before putting it in a braid down her back. That was one of the many things she was happy that her girlfriend had taught her, though Yugo wasn't her girlfriend at the time when she had learned it. Naruto, whenever she wasn't training with the Hokage, she ended up playing with her hair at some point. She liked how it felt so silky all the time, though she's not sure how it always ends up that way. Naruto just chalked it up to either genetics or the Kyuubi. Heaving a sigh of contentment, she stopped in front of a small shinobi shop, the Rusty Kunai. Walking forward, Naruto knocked lightly on the door and took a step back. It took a moment before a large burly man peeked his head out. "Eh? Who is it?" The man said in a gruff voice, "We're not open just yet, it's only 5:45 for all that is holy." "My apologies Higurashi-san, I just needed to get my order," Naruko said in her usual neutral monotone. The man before Naruko was Higurashi Kenichi. He's an ex-shinobi of Konohas who retired close to 14 years ago when his daughter was born and his wife passed away due to complications with the childbirth. The Sandaime Hokage was the person who had shown Naruko this place, as Kenichi apparently was an old friend of his. The man treated Naruko fairly, which was saying a lot considering how everyone else treated her, and since he sold just about everything one could need, she ended up shopping here quite often for the past 5 years. "Ah, Naruko-san. Come in, come in. I'll go grab your order from the back," Kenichi said, holding the door open for her. Naruko had a loyal customer, and one that paid very well, so he wasn't going to make a big fuss about it being a little too early for her. He quickly hurried off into the back. Naruko stood by the counter waiting as she paid more attention to the smell of the steel and cleaner than what Kenichi was doing. She loved this smell, not only because it reminded her of what Yugo had first smelled like when Naruko first met the woman, but also because her apartment smelled a lot like it as well. She had been so absorbed in the smell and the happy memory lane she was on, that she had almost not noticed someone creeping up on her. "Intruder!" the person yelled out as they swung a large sword at Naruko. Naruko responded by quickly stepping forward and completely out of harm's way. This however didn't stop her assailant as they continued to keep slashing at her. During this time Naruko quickly was able to notice it was a girl, and from her facial features, probably Kenichi's daughter. This was also further concluded when the girl started to use chakra in an attempt to swing faster. Not that it really helped as Naruko just kept moving out of the sword's line of attack without any effort at all. Naruko wasn't going to retaliate simply because she didn't want to hurt the girl, and from the girl's breathing she wasn't fully awake and was going to run out of steam soon. After a few minutes of just dodging lazily from the swings, Naruko noticed Kenichi was just standing there with her order, watching with an amused expression, making Naruko's eye twitch in annoyance, which apparently didn't go unnoticed by the retired shinobi. "Alright Tenten-chan, that's enough," Kenichi's booming voice called out, laughter clearly evident in the sound of his speech. The girl stopped upon hearing her father and looked at him with confusion. "Toa-san, what's going on? Do you know this girl?" the now identified Tenten asked, breathing heavier than normal. "Ha ha hi I do. Now stop attacking a customer and go get ready since you're up already. I'm sure your sensei will be by soon to get your morning workout, maybe you can actually join them this time," Kenichi said with clear humor in his voice and openly showing on his face. Tenten looked horrified at the prospect of having to do that. Naruko tried to think of who could possibly cause such fear into someone who just openly attacked her, who anyone should have been able to see that she was far superior in her skills. "As for you Naruko-san, here's your order. 50 special scrolls, and your custom ninjutsu that you requested, and a standard one as well. Both blades are made of chakra metal like you wanted," Kenichi said, as he handed her a single storage scroll that contained her purchases. Naruko nodded and took the scroll before handing him the second half of the money that she had been carrying with her. After the transaction was complete she walked out of the shop, stopping only to give a small bow to the store owner. Toa-san, who the hell was that?" Tenten asked, having been completely forgotten, as she stood there in her night clothes still holding a sword, and completely confused. Naruko found her way to one of the parks and quickly made her way into a tree with heavy cover. After finding a good branch to sit on and so she could lean her back onto the trunk without being seen, Naruko let out a sigh of contentment. The beginning sounds of nature waking up, the birds chirping, the few shop owners walking out and opening up their shops, and the few shinobi patrolling by, helped Naruko lull into a peaceful state. Not sleep mind you, but a nice meditative state. Naruko used to come to parks like this all the time, as it was always peaceful to her. It also helped remind her why she chose to become a kunoichi to defend the village. Those that came to these parks, those that she could hear without them hearing her, always seemed so innocent, so untouched by the ravages of war and conflict. It was for this reason that she continued on with being a kunoichi. She wanted to keep this peace, even if they refused to allow her to enjoy most of it herself. As Naruko listened more and more as children were starting to get up, she took out one of her scrolls and started quickly writing up a report. Naruko was halfway through when a presence appeared right above her, a presence that was most unwelcome at the moment. "Hello, Naruko-san," Iruka said as he stood on the branch just behind her. "Finally working on your homework?" Naruko internally gritted her teeth, not wanting to deal with the pushy Chunin instructor right now. Externally, she just smiled. "Hi Iruka-sensei. What are you doing here?" Naruko asked in her fake overly excited voice. "I was just passing on through. Instructors have to be there earlier than you students do." Iruka said in a kind manner. "Ready for class?" "Yeah, perfectly ready," Naruko said, quickly rolling up her scroll as Iruka tried to lean in and take a look. "What do you have there Naruko-san?" Iruka asked, being a little inquisitive about his student. "Oh, nothing really. Say, didn't you had to get to the academy early?" Naruko asked with a tilt of her head. There was no way in hell she was going to let him see an operation report and Anbu op. Not only would the Anbu commander have her hide, but so would the Hokage, and Yugo just might make a big deal about it as well. "I've got time. I'm normally a little early even by instructor standards," Iruka said with a small wave of his hand. "So what are you up to?" "I didn't think you'd be up this early." Naruko just turned towards where she could hear come early rising parents showing up with their young kids. The small genuine smile that appeared on her face caught Iruka by surprise and he turned to see what she was seeing. "I get up early every so often and come here just to listen to the sounds. It's rather soothing hearing everyone milling about and there being a true peace among everyone," Naruko said, her voice slipping into her actual soft tone she normally reserved for Yugo and the Sandame. Iruka looked at her with a surprised expression before a small smile of his own broke out. "It's why we train and do what we do, Naruko-san. It's also why your grades are so important," Iruka said, and when she looked at him he continued, "You are incredibly gifted Naruko-san. Your ability to constantly strive forward, despite your disability shows how committed you are. I know you can be an impressive kunoichi if you just put your mind to it." Naruko just sighed and looked up into the sky for a moment before heaving a second sigh and standing up. "Iruka," Naruko said in her normal emotionless tone, "this is just something that you don't have to worry about. You just need to focus on everyone else. Trust me on this," Naruko finished in her usual emotionless tone. Iruka was not able to believe what he had just heard. Naruko Uzumaki, a girl who he'd known to have mass amounts of energy and smiles, was acting different. More like that of a kunoichi that had years of experience and known a great deal. "Naruko-san," Iruka started to say before Naruko's face turned back into her wide smile. "Sorry, Iruka-sensei. I'll see you in class 1, just need to go speak with Sandame-sama about something." Later, Naruko said, seemingly back to her hyperactive self as she jumped from the tree and took off towards the Hokage's tower. Iruka stood there for a moment, worried about the sudden mood swing of Naruko but then just shrugged it off and chalked it up to puberty.
That's all for now. If you want to see next part, then please like this video and subscribe my channel. Thank you.